You really wouldn't think it from watching my videos, but in real life, people sometimes think that I'm very funny. I've had people cracking up, laughing in tears, laughing frequently, and not because I've intended to be funny or to make people laugh, but because really it's a matter of perspective. I made a video called Mindgasms, and in that video, I explained how that was one of my fundamental sources of pleasure. Being somebody who lives with anhedonia and who has a limited capacity to gain pleasure from the usual tasks and activities that people tend to find enjoyable. Mindgasms being an important source of pleasure and humor being another important source of pleasure. I don't have access to emotional highs and lows, but I do have access to a sense of humor, thank goodness. Because if it wasn't for having a sense of humor, I think that I would be in a great deficit. Thankfully, the world in general provides a good supply of humor, and so I'm fortunate to be able to see the funny side of life. I think that with schizoids, we can have a good sense of humor, and people may not think that about us because we don't generally um, emote. We can um, we can kind of like play around and like act and play out emotions, but it's not really coming from like a deep place. So when it comes to interpersonal connection, we're not gonna connect with other people emotionally. I think the reason why schizoids can have a good sense of humor is because we have the ability to see life from an alternative perspective, and with this perspective, there's often a lot of absurdity. So we can see contradictions, inconsistencies in situations that are playing out in the world around us, and sometimes just pointing out like basic truths that are occurring can be funny because it's sort of like nailing it, like showing where sort of human nature or human functioning sort of doesn't make sense or breaks down. And in some ways, that can be a relief for people because people can be holding a lot of tension because of contradictions or going along with situations that they don't really want to, but they feel that it's part of the life script. And sometimes just pointing that out in a certain way, because not in a hurtful way, but in a way that it's like, well, look at this thing, it kind of doesn't make sense. It's funny, like, can like lighten the load. Because rather than sometimes, and also it could be something that other people see as serious and heavy, but then when we can like point it out in a light way that says that like it's funny, then it no longer, but it can turn something from a negative heavy feeling into a light release feeling. So it shows that there's different ways you can take situations. You can look at it from a negative point of view, you can look at it from a positive point of view, or you can just look at it from a funny point of view. I think that does tie into that it is what it is type of psychological aspect of life. And in some ways, that is neutralizing. Even though it's funny, it can also be neutralizing. So it's taking the gravity out of a situation and then just looking at it as a construct, and that can be funny. I think laughing at the world does release tension, and I think that for me, laughing at the world is important. There are some things where, yeah, you have to draw the line, especially socially. I mean, in my mind, I don't find everything funny. There are obviously things that I find tragic. They say in humour, they have this symbol of a mask and it's laughing on one side and crying on the other. And they say that tragedy is often the basis of humour. I think there's some things that I just couldn't find funny because they are too tragic, unfortunately. So not everything is funny. So yeah, I get a good supply of humour, but at the same time, not everything is funny, which is of course normal because if a person found everything funny, that would be weird, and that would sort of neutralize or counteract the very notion of humor. Because if everything is funny, then nothing is actually funny because it's a contrasting process. So yeah, humor is important. I think that the schizoid humor does differ from the normal society humor in the sense that I think that a lot of times in society they like to laugh at events as they are. Like there can be quite a slapstick element, like things like candid camera or people like having accidents they find that funny or mishaps. Just physical occurrences for the sake of physical occurrences that go wrong. That's not my sort of humour. I actually really do not like that sort of thing because I like when life runs smoothly, and those sort of things I think are they lack depth, and also to me I just don't find them funny. But really, with the intellectualization with schizoids, we can go into some depth with our humor. We can go into conceptual inconsistencies and contradictions, and yeah, I mean there are some restrictions to the humor we can share in a sense that sometimes our humor could go over other people's heads because it can be so personalized, and also when you get into a lot of abstraction, the humor doesn't always carry through into other people's templates or frameworks of understanding. And so, yeah, sometimes it can be just an inside thing and something not to be shared. There have been some times when I've kind of tried to share humor and it's gone down like a lead balloon because it's just outside of other people's conceptual framework. Yeah, so humor. I like I like humor.